All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Thursday, the 10th day of November, less than a month until the presidential election. And as I've been doing, we're going to talk quite a bit about that election today. There's not going to be any real change. I mean, the topics have been pretty static. Genocide has a way of capturing all the oxygen in the room, at least as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there's also the climate holocaust, which is pretty darn important too. And we're seeing the fruits of that in Florida right now. But I'm going to, at least for most of, or I don't know how much, a good chunk of today's program really talk about the Middle East and our wholly amoral policy, the one that both the main party candidates, the two primary party candidates, are promoting. And there's the thumbnail. I don't always throw the thumbnails up there for you to see, but I'm going to focus on it a little bit today, and also the specific name of the program, which I gave. There's a title you put in YouTube. So I thought it was really instructive to just show the differences between the three candidates that I've been focusing on. I know there's some others. Cornel West, Dr. West is on in some states as an independent. I know RFK Jr. now has endorsed Trump. And then there's Claudia de la Cruz, the Peace and Socialist Freedom Party or something of that nature. So, she's good. Dr. West, under other circumstances, I might support. But we need, as progressives, to unify behind one candidate. And the only one who I think has any, real support behind her, the only decent person running who has any support behind her, is Dr. Stein. So, of course, I support her. And I think it's really important to just show that distinction between the three of them over a quote that I took out of the New York Times. I guess it was on the website yesterday. I think it's in the magazine. This is what Dr. Feroz Sidwa saw when he was working in Gaza trying to save lives. Every day I saw, or nearly every day I saw, a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die. And what Dr. Sidwa saw was not unique for him. I mean, he spoke to a lot of doctors who were, working there in Gaza during the Israeli genocide over the past year, and they the great majority of them saw exactly what he did. Children who, I want to cry. I don't cry. I'm not a crier. I remember talking about this back in Monterey with another, frequent caller of mine, and he was talking about how he does cry. I don't cry. I used to be a kid. I used to cry, but this is as horrific as it gets. The Israeli military soldiers, the soldiers in the Israeli so-called defense, I think IOF, Israeli Occupying Israeli Genocidal Force, is probably the best way to describe them now. So they're just targeting, they're shooting children in the head and the chest. There's no other way to describe this. Is genocide. This is Babi Yar 80 years later. 82 years later, 83 years later. It's so awful. It's so wrong. And your choices include one who says finish the job to Israel, another who insists over and over, despite pressure, to at least take a step back from our unconditional support, from the Harris-Biden unconditional support. The other says, Harris, my support is unwavering. It doesn't matter how many children, women, men, innocents Israel kills. It doesn't matter when Israel expands its theaters of operations. Kamala Harris will continue to supply Israel with the hardware it's using to kill Palestinians, Muslims, Lebanese, Druze, Arab Christians. It doesn't matter. she will continue to provide them with the weaponry. Only Jill Stein has the moral forthrightness to say the genocide and occupation must stop. There's no choice here. There's no option. You cannot vote for, and I was telling somebody this who was, talking about their vote. And I said, and they said, well, I hear everything you're saying, but I'm still voting for Harris. And, I said, hey, I'm not going to shame you. You vote for whoever you want. But I'm backing away from that. I don't know how there can be any moral choice in this case. And let me get that second oval off. That's irritating me because I've already got one in my thumbnail. 240-242-5646. Please call. We talked to Chuck about this yesterday, and he said, hey, I'm voting for Harris. And I get it, right? I get it. I'm, all right. But I don't get it. I understand it, but I morally recoil in this moment from supporting a candidate who, in these times, will not say, I can't support Israel. Now, I put in the title, I want to talk about this, from HI, Hawaii to Maine, from AK to Tex, from Alaska to Texas, Jill Stein is the only choice. And the reason I put that qualifying phrase at the beginning, the modifying phrase, in other words, adding from, top to bottom, Alaska to Texas, from west to east, Hawaii to Maine, is because I posted something similar on Facebook and social media where I said, it was in response to a post lamenting the genocide. And the person who posted got a lot of pushback. This was on October 7. It was posted, a lot of pushback from Jews, I guess, or from the names it seemed like Jewish social media participants and other Zionists saying, hey, this is a day of mourning for Israel. We get it. It's really bad what's happening in Gaza. They weren't arguing, saying, well, it's not true. It's not happening. But, hey, this isn't the right day to post that. And I took a different tact. I'm like, no, the genocide's happening now. This is what we should be talking about. But I also added, I can't vote for anyone who supports the genocide, including Kamala Harris. And a somewhat frequent, from at least their calls and posts, a viewer of this program pushed back and said, I get where you're coming from. If I lived in Maryland like you, I wouldn't vote for Harris either. I would vote for Stein. But, in purple states, you got to maybe take a different tack. And no. From Alaska to Texas, from Hawaii to Maine, you cannot vote for either, obviously, Trump, but obviously Harris too. And for those of you who say, well, all right, yeah, she's bad on genocide, but she might be better. She's bad on every friggin' issue. This isn't a case where you've got Al Gore, who's actually pretty darn good on a lot of issues, and W, who was arguably the worst president of all time, running against Gore. I mean, at the time he hadn't been president, so we didn't know he was going to be the worst president, but we could foresee a lot of really bad stuff happening under W. This isn't 2000. This isn't your father's or your mother's. This isn't your parents' Green Party potential spoiler. This is a case where you've got two monsters, two genocidal, ecocidal monsters running in the race against each other, the Republican and the Democrat. Your only choice, your only moral option is Jill Stein. I was thinking about how bad our choices are today also. Now, I think a big reason for this is because Kamala was anointed by the Democratic Party establishment. There was no primary. There was no meaningful primary, and the establishment kept them there from being a primary. So there was this unifying principle: we have to support Biden among the Democrats, which tragically Bernie bought into. Bernie a little too old. Maybe if Bernie was 10, 15 years younger, he would have considered a primary run. I don't know. I like to think that maybe not. Maybe not. the options there were in the Democratic primary, at least at the very beginning, were awful Marianne Williamson, who simply couldn't figure out a way to distinguish herself meaningfully from Biden on war, and RFK Jr., who was good on Ukraine, but awful, even, worse perhaps than Biden and Williamson when it came to Israel. So, no, we didn't have a choice in the primary. If there had been a real choice, there probably would have been some dispute among the potential nominees, the combatants for the nomination, to argue against the unwavering support for Israel that we were providing. Perhaps that would have happened. I don't know, but it didn't. And Harris was anointed. Certainly, public opinion, especially in a Democratic primary, would have leaned towards a candidate who took a more nuanced position versus Israel, but we never got that opportunity. So that's one thing I was thinking. The other thing I was thinking, though, is that if you look back at recent presidents, and I think we've had just a terrible run. But if you look back at recent presidents, and I wasn't alive. Let me just talk about terrible run. I wasn't alive until 1963. And I don't remember anything that happened until the 1970s, I don't believe. Maybe, when my sister was born in 68, I kind of remember that, but that's pretty much it. From FDR through LBJ, we actually had good presidents. I mean, they weren't perfect. They did some really bad things. I'm skeptical how good a president JFK was or would have been. But FDR, Truman, Ike, and LBJ did some really important and good stuff. Now, they did bad things too, but on balance, that was a pretty decent run. It was probably because we had more economic equality and candidates had to compete for votes without too much fear-mongering and scaremongering. So things were a little bit better in certain areas, in certain ways at that time. In other ways, they were worse, but we did make progress. We made progress certainly in the civil rights area over that period of time. Very significant progress. We made very significant progress reining in the forces of wealth, the malign forces of wealth. So presidents were maybe a little bit better then. I think Bill Clinton was a bad president. I think George W. Bush was one of the worst presidents we've ever had. I think Barack Obama was a bad president. But I do believe that those three, and especially for whatever reason, W and Obama would not have been as complicit in this genocide. I really have, and maybe it's just pure wishful thinking, it's forgetfulness. I think Barack Obama would have said to Bibi, you can't do this. I think he would have said, we're not going to provide you with the arms. I truly do. And I think probably Clinton would have done that, and very probably, possibly W also. I don't think they would have felt this need or this, they would have been under some sort of compulsion that we're seeing now. I mean, Trump is a sociopath. He is. He's a narcissist. He has some impulses. We've seen maybe sociopath a little too strong, some impulses. Maybe he really cares a little bit about the people in Ukraine and Russia, doesn't want to see those countries absolutely destroyed, especially Ukraine in this ongoing war. He's spoken against it. I give him credit for that. I don't know why he feels the need to be even more bellicose with the language, finish the job. So horrific. I don't know where that comes from. I don't think Harris is a deep thinker. I don't think she's never shown empathy or compassion for others. She's kind of an empty moral vessel. Joe Biden is demented. I don't know whether he would have a different view if he were 20 years younger. And I would say also about Biden, he's 80, he's in his early 80s now. He doesn't remember World War II. He wasn't alive then, but maybe he was alive if I do the math right. At the end, anyway, he was alive by the end of the war. But in the aftermath, the revelations of the Holocaust, I think, did impact on a lot of that earlier, not baby boom, but World War II generation, a kind of a feeling that we have to be very sensitive to Jewish people because they've gone through so much. So maybe that's playing into this. I can't speak to it. I do believe even the really crappy presidents we've had in recent years would have done something, wouldn't have been so completely complicit in this horrific genocide. I could be wrong, but that's something I got to go on. Situation remains, or is, well, I guess it just keeps getting worse. I don't want to say it remains awful. It keeps getting worse and worse. More and more people killed by Israel, more and more innocents. The genocide remains going full steam there. No one's stopping Israel, and I guess they feel completely empowered. 83 Palestinians killed yesterday. This is from the Kuwaiti news service, and they get their information from the Gaza Ministry of Health. 83 killed in the past 24 hours. The death count now, the official count, as far as it can be official, and again, we know this is an undercount. We know that the total number of victims of the Israeli genocide is quite a bit higher. No one really knows. 42,093 was the number according to the Kuna news service, Kuwait news service today. And that's gone up because Israel attacked a school today. Yet another attack on a school. Got into that story in a little bit about the Israeli military, Israeli soldiers shooting children in the chest. And this is not like some random thing where they're like engaged in a firefight and it's the fog of war. These are snipers. These are soldiers. They're not at any risk. They're not confronting Hamas militants. They're just shooting children. That's what Harris Biden support. Here's what else they support, and it's a reflection of such a terrible, terrible foreign policy failure, which is, again, the unwavering support, the continuing gush of bullets, bombs, missiles to Israel, and the use of our advanced technology to prevent casualties in Israel, of Israelis, which empowers them, which emboldens them, which gives them the immunity and the impunity to continue without risking. Bibi can say, hey, I'm not even risking Israeli lives when I go on my killing sprees, my continuous rampages. Want to join me? 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646 from PBS. Here we go.
Thousands upon thousands of Lebanese are fleeing Israeli bombing across southern and central Lebanon as Hezbollah continues its rocket and missile fire into northern Israel. As fears of an all-out regional war mount, special correspondent Leila Milana Allen sits down with the Lebanese official managing the humanitarian response in a country that was already on its knees before this latest conflict.
Earlier today, 90 Hezbollah missiles were launched across Lebanon's border into Israel, after what many here saw as a bold provocation yesterday. IDF soldiers planting an Israeli flag in Lebanese territory on the southern border. And
all right, so think about that before I play a little more of this clip. But I mean, this is a war of aggression by Israel. They're claiming, we're protecting ourselves from Hezbollah. It's a war of aggression. They're expanding the territory of Israel. The analogy to Nazi Germany is very, very close, right? Expanding our borders, pushing out, occupying, colonizing lands. That is what Israel is doing. We are supporting them. Harris, Biden are supporting them. That's why they're able to do it. That's why they're doing it. Can't vote for that. I don't know how you could.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu issued a warning to the Lebanese people.
You have an opportunity to save Lebanon before it falls into the abyss of a long war that will lead to destruction and suffering like we see in Gaza.
All right, so there it is. He's threatening a Holocaust in Lebanon, right? He's threatening a genocide in Lebanon. You're going to fall into the abyss of war. In other words, the abyss of us killing you and killing you and killing you. I hear from people, well, it's in the power of Hamas to end this. No, they don't have any power. Israel has all the power. So the idea that this is if they would just release the hostages. No, Israel has repeatedly said they won't stop. I mean, that's been part of the deal that Hamas agreed to. Yeah, we'll give you the hostages, stop killing us. Give us some space to breathe. There's nothing the Palestinian people can do except get killed, get murdered. There's nothing right now the people of Lebanon can do. They can't flee either. Israel's put up roadblocks to prevent them from getting into Syria. And this is who we support. That is what we are enabling. I'll get to the story in the New York Times. I just had one quick news, just real quick update, because it is happening now. It's breaking news, I suppose, right from the New York Times. So the situation in Florida with Hurricane Milton is really bad. Apparently, though, not quite as bad as the worst fears. 30 miles away from St. Petersburg, which is very, very populated, was where the storm hit. So could have been worse, frankly. It could have been worse. I note, I've been to that region once. It's so low level. There's so many homes built right, a few feet above sea level. It's really crazy that this would be, what were people thinking? Well, the developers were thinking, I tell you what they were thinking, we'll make a quick buck. We'll be long gone before this area is underwater. And people were buying, saying, I want beachfront property. And even if it's not beachfront, you could be a few miles away. You can get a relatively inexpensive house if you're far from the water, but you're still right at sea level. So the good news there, I suppose, is that the water, the storm, the hurricane, did not pound directly at St. Petersburg, but a lot of damage. For deaths, we've seen hundreds reported as a result of Helene. We'll see if presumably this count will go up, but again, it could have been a lot worse, at least at this point. I think the big factor is where the storm hit. It didn't ply directly in with those 100+ mile per hour winds into St. Pete, Tampa Bay. All right, let's get to that story I mentioned in the New York Times. I put on by a doctor. This is in there right now. It's a current trauma surgeon who served in many places around the world. I guess kind of a Doctors Without Borders kind of guy, Dr. Farouz. And here he opens up by telling us his history a little bit. This is how this newspaper, and they call it an opinion piece. This was a comment I thought was very good. Why is this an opinion? It's not opinion, it's just fact. But This is a trauma surgeon who was in Gaza for, I guess if I do my math right, that's 13 days. Volunteered in Ukraine, Haiti too. These are obviously areas with terrible problems with violence. U.S. bearing great responsibility for both, almost completely responsible for what happened in Haiti. Are Clinton's especially constantly destabilizing the regime, intervening, preventing any kind of progressive efforts to help the working poor in Haiti, and it's led to this, the nation imploding. It's a void now. We've provoked Russia until they invaded Ukraine and then stopped a potential peace there. So obviously Ukraine, a disaster as well, but nothing compared to what this doctor saw. He describes a new young child shot in the head or chest. Virtually every single one died. He was there for 13 days. He saw 13 children shot in the head or chest. It's as bad as it can be. It just is that awful. Dr. Feroz, let me get the name right, Feroz Sidwa. And this is in your New York Times. If you want to read it, I strongly urge you to check it out. There are a lot of quotes in there I really want to share with you. They're all so awful. But I think we can't just ignore it. We can't, the thing is, Charlie Chaplin said in his movie Monsieur Verdoux, which is about a serial killer in France between the wars, kind of a Bluebeard type. It was based on a serial killer named Landru, a wife killer. He says, numbers sanctify. He says, I was nothing. I killed like 20 people. But nations, dictators, tyrants kill people in the millions. And he's made the point, we can't integrate it. It becomes we start to just numb. But so you understand what Sidwa experienced, he says he spoke to 65 doctors, and of those 44 or healthcare providers, nurses and paramedics saw multiple cases, 44 of preteen children shot in the head or chest. 9 did not. So, this is important because if there had been 1,000, you'd say, okay, well, no, it'd be still horrible. But this means all over the country, everywhere, Israeli soldiers are probably being told, commanded to, or certainly not in any way prevented from simply flat out murdering. These are war crimes. These are atrocities that we are abetting. So only 9 of those consulted did not see this. Some more quotes. One night, I saw 6 children with single gunshot wounds to the skull. Saw several children shot with high-velocity bullet wounds in head and chest. That's Dr. Perlmutter. He's a Jewish doctor, I would assume, from the name. Dr. Galeria, we cared for 4 or 5 children, all shot with single shots to the head. All died. Kamala Harris, my support for Israel is unwavering. I looked at the comments from this article. I thought about posting them. I didn't need to, but it's closed. The comment section was closed. There were comments from people who questioned it, doubted didn't believe it. It's interesting to me that there are still people who, despite all the images, we've seen the pictures, we have many, many witnesses to the Israeli atrocities. It interests me that there are people who believe Israel, but don't believe the Palestinians, don't believe the witnesses to the Israeli horrors. Even though the witnesses from Israel, the quote witnesses, unquote, are often found to have been lying or mistaken. The extant evidence does not corroborate stories told by those claiming to have observed horrible acts by Palestinians, by Hamas. Yes, we know Hamas killed many, many people on October 7. There's no question a lot of murder occurred. But the claims of sexual assault, those have simply not been corroborated. The evidence doesn't support them. They've often been debunked. And yet many will still insist that those allegations are true, but that they cannot believe their own eyes. They cannot believe the many witnesses to the horrors that Israel is committing, the crimes that Israel is committing. Try not to cherry pick. So I went through the top 10 readers' picks. That means those that got the most recommendations in this article. So I'm just going to go through a few of them. There was no one who doubted the veracity of the doctor who told the story, right, who reported. There were no doubts about that, which I was glad to see. I was glad. I mean, yeah, good. You shouldn't doubt it. That was good. But there's one thing I noticed in all 10 comments, which I'll get to. I don't want to tell you. We'll see if you can figure it out yourself. But there's one thing that struck me. So from H, this is number one. I'm not H, by the way. Thank you for this piece, a much needed article in Western media, which has glossed over one of the greatest horrors of our time. So H sees it much as I do. These are war crimes. These are genocide crimes. These are as bad as it gets. That's all by Israel. Here's another piece. I really agreed with what Yvonne here had to say. She's writing in from Germany. Why is this an opinion piece? This is news, right? They put it under opinion, which is really wrong. That's what the New York Times did. They don't want, they've got their opinion writers like Bret Stephens who continue to defend Israel. And not only defend Israel, but kind of lionize Israel as though there's something good and noble about this criminal state. I like what she writes at the end. I hope the doctors have time to save the bullets. One hopes a future inquiry will pursue the soldiers and their commanders. Yeah. I mean, look at the Nazi hunters like Leon Wiesenthal, and I respect them. I think what they did was very, very important. But what will we have the same commitment to holding these criminals accountable? I hope so. So those were the top two. I don't have all 10 here. I looked at all 10. I read all 10. I did not cherry pick. So I'm from H in the US and Yvonne in Germany, the number 1 and 2 picks in the article from readers in terms of what got the most recommendations. But one thing I noticed in all 10, despite the incredibly distraught tone, how upset people were, and rightly so, how hurt and, how painful it is to read about what Israel's doing, our ally, what we are doing. As much as that did stand out for me, what also stood out is not one person said, vote for Jill Stein. Not one positive, not one of the top 10 reader-supported comments said you can't vote for the Harris-Biden team. Not one of them. the Harris-Walz team. Not one person said this is so. The people criticize the United States. I think there may have been the name. I don't remember seeing the name Kamala Harris. Yes, there were criticisms of Joe Biden. But we seem incapable of doing the one thing that could potentially, I'm not saying we'll end it, the one thing that could maybe stop this. And that is to not vote for the politicians who back it. Not vote for the politicians who have made us complicit. All right, this is Halitics. I hope you'll I hope you'll subscribe. Here's Dr. Stein.
In terms of the impact on, the genocide being conducted in Palestine right now by Israel and the United States, who knows what Donald Trump will do? It's certainly not preferable by all indicators to what the Harris-Biden or the Biden-Harris administration is doing right now. So we have one candidate who's actually committing the genocide right now. And in spite of her promises and her slightly milder rhetoric, is actually continuing the same full transfer of weapons, who refuses to consider even a weapons embargo to put a halt to the genocide. And then we have another candidate who's threatening to continue the job. So, if the American people want other options, they're certainly entitled to them.
All right. So I thought that was worth playing. One thing that struck me, and I've got another clip of, maybe I don't have another clip. I was watching another clip of STEIN, who was at a rally in Michigan a few days ago, which, by the way, is very interesting. We'll talk about Michigan in a little bit. But I was thinking when I was watching that video where she was at the rally and she stumbled over her words, she didn't speak as clearly, as concisely, as powerfully as I would have liked. And she's often very, very good and she's very bright. But I was thinking of something that Chuck said yesterday during the program. By the way, that was a good program with Chuck. I hope you'll check it out if you haven't yet. He said she's not a leader. And I didn't push back at the time, but I didn't really agree with that. I've seen her myself. I've met her. And I think leaders are often made by the people. If you think somebody has good ideas and will promote them and will do what you want, and if they have power, then you hope you make them a leader if you can. And hopefully they'll do the right thing. But there is something to the idea of charisma and speaking in a way that rallies people. And, I feel like in this moment, she hasn't presented herself in a way that, is a beacon for us all to rally behind. Now, that said, look, she's so much better than the alternative. But it's a little bit unfortunate because a more dynamic, and I think she knows that. Dr. Stein knows that. She didn't even necessarily want to run. She ran because her previous running mate, Ajamu Baraka, said, no, I'm not going to do it. You do it. You're better. You're the right one for this position. So, okay. And I so much props to her. And this is not a criticism, but yeah, she's not that dynamic leader that would be nice to have in this moment. A couple of comments here from X, right, from the Twitter feeds, and then we're going to move over to Michigan and an interesting story there about the Abandon Harris movement. So this is from Professor Zenkist. I think I've heard that name. I don't know why, Prof. Zenkist. And I got to say, this is pretty funny, I think, because, I looked at this tweet and I thought, is this guy supporting Harris? Because we hear this all the time, right? She's happy, she's jolly, she's enjoying life, she's smiley, so we should support her. And I'm like, wow, that's your test, is whether the person smiles a lot. I mean, it's not policy, it's not have they done good things. Sometimes smiling isn't appropriate, right? sometimes there are times when you don't smile, or at least I don't smile. So here's Professor Zenkis. She's just like me in an incredible moment, Harris. Zenkis is quoting Kamala's wins. In an incredible moment, Kamala Harris just cracked open a beer with Colbert. Harris is showing off her personable and loving personality. Wow. Do you fall for that? Does any of that like do something for you? I so don't understand that. Maybe you can tell me if you think this reflects Kamala Harris's personable and loving personality. From where I sit, personable and loving would be no more aid to Israel. That's what I would call love. Love for humanity. And here's another really good tweet. This is from one of my all-time faves, right? Brianna Joy Gray. She's not going after Harris here. She's going after, is he the worst person in the world, Keith Olbermann? I have to say, probably. So from Olbermann, save your high horse to Peter Dow for when the rest of us aren't about to be thrown into rivers of blood by Trump, you stupid MFer. And I blocked that out. I don't think Google wanted me to have the MFer written out for some reason or other, Google Docs. This is a liberal, meaning Olbermann telling the Lebanese man, because Dow is Lebanese, whose people are currently being murdered under Biden to vote Dem, lest they be thrown into the rivers of blood by Trump. So clearly, there are rivers of blood in Lebanon, in Palestine. Bibi threatened. He said, hey, do you want the same suffering that we're going to, that we're putting down on Gaza and Lebanon? Well, how dare Keith Olbermann? What a piece of human crap he is. Is there anything worse, really, than a liberal who is in high dudgeon at all moments against Republicans, but then can't even muster sympathy for the victims of democratic crimes, democratic criminals like Hillary, like the Harris-Biden administration now? It's really quite extraordinary. This is where we are. This is where we are as a society. We become so partisan. We cannot see the evil on our own team. This is where we are. Okay, this is a really interesting video. This is from SAN News. I'm not really clear what they are, but I thought it was interesting. And there's a quote in there I'm glad they put from Kashama Sawant. I want to say her name wrong. Kashama Sawant. Is that right? I hope I got that right. Maybe they'll say it during the clip. Let's play it.
A progressive campaign group in Michigan is shifting their support away from the Democratic ticket, putting Democrats' hopes for a victory in the swing state in jeopardy. Abandon Harris, a group critical of the vice president, has endorsed Green Party candidate Jill Stein, with specific intention to remove support from the Democratic Party.
We need to be clear about what our goals are. We are not in a position to win the White House. But we do have a real opportunity to win something historic. We could deny Kamala Harris the state of Michigan.
I'm going to stop it there. So that's Kashama Sawant, and she said that that's gotten a lot of controversy. It's been played over the internet a number of times. And, I heard that. I'm kind of mixed on that. So she says, we have a historic opportunity. We're not going to win, but we can keep Harris from winning Michigan, which presumably could give the election to Trump. And she's saying that's a good thing. And I heard the Do Dissidents bros talk about this yesterday, and they said that is good, right? Let's talk about this. This is how we build support. If we promote voting green as a way to defeat the Democrat, this will show that we have real power and people may support us. And I'm like, yeah, but, the argument that Trump is worse isn't completely wrong. He is worse in some areas. So you may be also activating or exciting pretty liberal or very progressive Democrats or independents to say, yeah, well, we definitely prefer Stein. She's a better person. She'd be a better president, but she ain't going to win. So, and Sawant just said that she ain't going to win. So I guess we have to vote for Harris. So I'm kind of on the fence. I don't say this because I also don't necessarily agree that a vote for Stein is a vote for Trump. I don't necessarily buy it. Well, first of all, it isn't in my case because I'll never vote for Stein. I mean, I will vote for Stein. I will never vote for Harris. It's not like I'm debating or choosing between Stein and Harris. It's either Stein or nobody. Just like in 2016, it was either Stein or nobody. I wasn't going to vote for Hillary. So you're not, I don't see a difference between the two. Not a meaningful one. So, meaning Harris and Trump. But I don't necessarily agree even that voting for Stein means you're going to deny Michigan to her. Maybe. But I don't want either one to win. On the other hand, I do understand the argument, well, we have to beat Harris. Since Harris and Trump are equally bad, or almost equally bad, which is, I believe, true, we gain some leverage if we can take down one of them, in this case, Harris. We gain leverage over the Democratic Party. That is definitely true. There's no chance the Democratic Party will ever modify its pro-war, pro-ecocide policies if it continues to get votes from the left. It will never modify its pro-war, pro-genocide, pro-ecocide positions as long as it gets votes from the left. So if you want to have representation, it seems to me you can't vote for the Democrats. If you're anti-war, if you're pro-peace, if you're anti-genocide, I don't see how you can vote for the Democrats. Because you're telling them those issues aren't important enough for you to withhold your vote from them. So why would they be important to the Democratic elites who profit from war, who profit from ecocide, who profit from genocide? Of course, they're not going to change unless they might lose. But it was interesting, that statement, and I didn't want to not play it for you, even though I have some issue with it, and I'm not even sure it's true. But let's play a little more from Kshama Sawant.
The group argues the Biden-Harris administration has abandoned progressive policies. Their endorsement of Stein is seen as a signal of disillusionment from the party's left-wing base and may affect Democratic turnout. The endorsement comes from a large demographic of primarily Muslim Americans in Michigan, citing anger at the Democratic Party for supporting Israel in the war with Hamas. Trump also has sided with Israel throughout his entire 2024 campaign, recently saying he is Israel's protector. A recent poll in the region shows 40% of Muslim voters backed Stein, while Trump and Harris trail behind at 18% and 12% respectively. Michigan is home to one of the largest Arab communities in the United States. Stein, a Jewish longtime progressive and Green Party candidate with anti-Israel sympathies, previously ran for president in 2012 and 2016. While her progressive platform includes environmental advocacy, universal health care, and economic reform, she is not without controversy. In past elections, Stein has been...
All right, I'll stop it there because it's going on a little bit past where I wanted to cut it off. I forgot to do... I thought I had cut it off earlier, but I didn't. So, that clip. Sawant saying, and I get what her point is, again, we can deny Harris the White House. That will show our power. And I think that's true. I think that's right. I think by denying Harris, if the Democratic elites are persuaded that by promoting genocide, by supporting genocide, by unwaveringly backing Israel, they cost themselves the presidency. It could cause a little soul searching, but I don't think they'll change. They're not going to change. But what we do need to do, and the Democrat Party isn't going to change. I actually don't believe that. I think what we have to do is build a movement. Maybe that happens if we can defeat the Democrats. Maybe. All right, we've got a couple more stories. I love your comment on this. I know a lot of people disagree with me, but again, I don't see the difference. You see, the problem, when you argue to me, but you're helping elect Trump, my response is, I don't care. I mean, what? So? I mean, I'm not, first of all. Maybe if a few people listen to me and they vote for Harris instead of they vote for Stein instead of Harris, maybe that does help Trump. I don't deny it. But my vote isn't helping Trump because I wasn't going to vote for Harris under any circumstances, whether Stein's in the race or not. And I think you should save your dudgeon, your high dudgeon, and your anger for the Democrats for being so evil, for supporting a country that is telling its soldiers, shoot children in the head, shoot children in the chest. That's where you should be focusing. Maybe if they see a sudden plummeting of the polling numbers in Michigan, Kamala Harris changes her position. Maybe Joe Biden cuts off aid for Israel. That would be a desirable outcome. I got a few more minutes left. I wasn't necessarily going to talk about, there's a couple, so let me do this. I got an email from one of my longtime supporters, longtime listener, viewer, whatever you want to call them, who was upset because some of their posts were being shadow banned by Facebook. And I was quite surprised, and there's some really interesting nuances to that. I was surprised that this person's posts were shadow banned because I never found them to be particularly controversial. Mine are far more so. And I've been shadow banned, but not by, Facebook. No, I don't think. I'm pretty sure they've never shadow banned me, which is where your posts look like they're up and you can see them, but no one else can. Actually, I think I was shadow banned. Okay, so here's who I've been shadow banned by particular. I'll talk about this a little bit. I actually wanted to talk about Jimmy Dore, but I'll talk about this. So what has happened to me on YouTube is I've been pretty critical of some of the competition, if you want to call it that. I'm not much competition to them, but to my competitors like Kyle Kulinski, I really just think that guy's a jerk. So I posted some really critical stuff on his page in response, commenting on his videos. And I've been shadow banned. So I can see it, but no one else can, right? So I don't know I'm banned. I see it goes up when I go to his video where I posted it. I can see my comment. Like now, which would be something like, now are you going to endorse Jill Stein? He'll say something mildly critical of Kamala Harris or of the Democrats, and I'll say, well, now are you going to endorse Jill Stein, which he's not going to do. But it kind of is embarrassing to him, right, that I would say that. So I was shadow banned from his page, or one of my aliases, because I have more than one alias. So one of my aliases was shadow banned, and I always see my post, but no one else does. And I was curious. Well, I was wondering why there were no likes, right? Usually you get some likes. You post something provocative, someone's going to like it or comment or reply. But there's nothing after a few hours. So then I thought, maybe no one else can see that except for me. So I used another alias to log on to that, or to go to that video and look at the comments. And sure enough, mine wasn't. You couldn't see it. It wasn't there. So I'd been shadow banned by Kulinski, at least one of my aliases was. On Salon.com, .com, which is super liberal, super identity politics, but no economic justice, really hyper-partisan website, mocks working class voters, white working class voters especially, very aggressively dismissive of them. And I would criticize some of their commenters as well, and the same thing would happen. I'd see my post, but no one would comment on it. I couldn't see any comments. No one would reply to my comments, so I figured out I was shadow banned. I create aliases, but after a while it gets tedious. I stopped doing it altogether. That's what Coast does. Daily Coast really is well known for shadow banning. So those are all pages that have shadow banned me. Never happened on, as far as I know, on Facebook. On Facebook, I've had groups, pause my privileges, but that's fine. It says your privileges are paused. You can't post. That's fine. Okay. I mean, I don't like it, but just like on Halitics, I can stop you or hold your posts up because it's my page. You have moderators, you can do it. But I haven't had the actual experience of where Facebook or X or an overarching platform has done that. So I was really surprised and somewhat disappointed to learn that Facebook is doing that. It's very undemocratic. It's very wrong. They shouldn't be doing that. Maybe I'll talk more about that tomorrow. I don't have time, but I also wanted to just quickly share this story with you. So this is from the Vanguard. I don't love the Vanguard by any means. They're kind of a liberal, sort of somewhat lefty, but establishment. You can see those guys there in the sort of bottom right. But they're very aggressive against Jimmy Dore. They don't like Jimmy Dore. And, I used to really like Jimmy Dore. I stopped subscribing to Jimmy Dore for reasons very differently than the Vanguard. My view has always been that Jimmy's criticisms of the Democratic Party have, in general, and certainly up until very recently, been completely justified and have served a very important, very valuable service, really exposing just how corrupt the Democratic Party is and how it betrays workers and its stated values at every opportunity. Jimmy's done tremendously good work there. Exposed, he went after the squad way before a lot of the rest of us saw just how craven they were. Force the vote was a brilliant idea. And although it wasn't adopted by the Democrats, because it wasn't adopted by the progressive or the squad, the progressive left in the House, challenging Pelosi, saying, we're not going to vote for you to be speaker unless you do this, that, and the other thing. They did refuse to do that. By doing that, by refusing to follow Jimmy's excellent idea, they exposed themselves. So Jimmy's done some really good work. But he's lately moved in a direction I'm not happy with, skeptical, some expressing climate crisis skepticism, especially, going after a hero like a Greta Thunberg, who's admittedly not perfect, right? She's been pro-Ukraine war, which is unfortunate, but, that's her bailiwick is the climate, and she's been spot on, and he's tried to, kind of diminish her. And, to make her less important, weaken her. And I don't like that. He's given a lot of oxygen to the phony currencies, the crypto kooks. He's become a crypto kook. So there's a lot of areas where I don't like Jimmy. Here's Vanguard saying Jimmy Dore whines about declining views as his channel tanks. And they say he's lost a lot of influence. He has fewer views. He's less important in the sphere. And I think they're right. I think they actually got that right. I feared when Jimmy kind of went over to that RFK Jr. stuff because RFK Jr. is a crypto kook and has expressed some climate crisis skepticism. I feared it could make him more popular, but I think he lost his base, and that's good, bad, whatever. I mean, it's the way it is. He kind of stopped being a real truth teller. And it hurt him. There are lots of people who don't tell the truth who are doing great on the internet. But in this case, I guess it was a somewhat bad thing that happened for pretty good reason. All right, that's going to do it. I just thought you'd be interested in that kind of evolving story with Jimmy, how his ratings have gone down a little bit. And I think it's because he's not as fearless, or he's not as laser focused on exposing Democratic corruption, Democratic complicity. And that's good, bad, whatever. That's the way it is. We got to sort of stick to our lanes a little bit, perhaps. It's interesting because the story they show actually really, let me just put this back one more time with those two guys. Elon betrays free speech, caves to Brazilian censors. And that's a good, I'm glad you're talking about that, Jimmy. So that shows he's even-handed. He's not just criticizing Democrats like Hillary Clinton, who's called for censorship, but also going after big shot like Musk. So good job there, Jimmy. You know, a guy who's associated Elon Musk with the Trump campaign. And Doer's been more sympathetic to Republicans, which I get. I'm not criticizing him for that, but I am going to criticize him if he doesn't call out Republican crimes. And he did. So good for you. Good for you, Jimmy. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Sorry your ratings are down, but I understand it. If you're going to embrace climate science denialism, and if you're going to embrace crypto nuts, then yeah, I don't want you to be doing well. That's going to do it for me. I'll be back tomorrow for the free for all. Have a great afternoon.